Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go to my AEW Blood and Guts review. Starting off the evening, we're going to our first match of the night. It is Kenny Omega and Michael Nakazawa versus Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley. Starting off the match, Omega quickly attacks Kingston and Moxley. Pretty much a back and forth matchup though. Omega then hits a Guitar Crusher on Eddie Kingston in the middle of the ring. Kingston and Moxley then both exchange in the middle of the ring. Moxley then is choking out Michael Nakazawa. Omega ends up leaving him in the ring. Kingston then and Moxley hit the finish on Nakazawa, pin in for the 3, and your winners of the match are Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley. After the match, though, Young Bucks come down to the ring, pretty much causes a distraction. The Good Brothers then attack Kingston and Moxley from behind, and then the Elite end up attacking and pretty much just beating the crap out of Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. So, obviously, this storyline between Eddie Kingston, Jon Moxley, and the Elite is far from over. And I'm very much looking forward to what's going to happen next. I honestly think in my mind that maybe, just maybe, somebody might join Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley to go up against the Elite, which I'm all for it, man. Obviously, there's still a lot of beef going on between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega, stemming from even from their match they had in the barbed wire match, and then obviously when Don Callis kind of gave Kenny Omega the win, which gave him the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. So obviously the storyline's far from over between Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley, but hats off to Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston for getting the win in this match. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card as well. It is QT Marshall versus Cody Rhodes. Starting off the match, Cody quickly attacks QT. QT then hits Cody with a weight belt. QT then slaps Arn Anderson ringside. Anderson then attacks QT Marshall. But it's a pretty much back and forth matchup between QT and Cody. QT ends up hitting a crossroads on Cody Rhodes. Cody then gets up, hits a crossroads of his own on QT Marshall. Cody then applies a figure 4 leg lock on QT Marshall, and your winner of the match by submission is Cody Rhodes. After the match, though, Anthony Ogogo comes down to the ring, ends up hitting Cody Rhodes with a body shot, and the match is over. Number one, it's great to see Cody Rhodes back. Obviously, there's a little storyline going on between the Factory and the Nightmare family, especially stemming from QT Marshall and Cody Rhodes. The one thing I will take away, man, is Anthony Ogogo. And I mentioned this in the past. Obviously, Anthony Ogogo, big time boxer. And I'm not taking anything away from the man's craft or his ability of what he can do inside that ring. And I'm all for other athletes from different sports that come over to pro wrestling that want to get, a shot at being a pro wrestler. I'm all for it. But you're going to have to give me something else better than this body shot. He's been doing it for weeks now. We get it. You're a boxer. I understand. Now you're in the wrestling world. Now I need to see what you can do inside the wrestling ring as far as being a wrestler is concerned. As far as the Factory as a stable, I don't think it's needed either. I think there's enough stables right now in AEW that's just perfect right now. You have the Inner Circle, you have Pinnacle, then you have the Elite. That's perfect the way it is right now. I just feel like the Factory is just something that QT threw together to try to get himself back onto TNT television rather than being on AEW Dark or AEW Elevation. And I'm not taking anything away from QT. I think QT's a good wrestler. But at the same time, too, this is a stable that's just not needed. And as far as Anthony Ogogo, it does look like he's going to have a match against Cody Rhodes, possibly maybe at Double or Nothing, which hopefully then we'll see him in a wrestling capacity and see what he can actually do inside the squared circle. But besides all that, hats off to Cody Rhodes for getting the win in this match. Moving on from that, we have an Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky segment. Pretty much Scorpio Sky disses Sting. Sky says that Sting has worn out his welcome in AEW. Ethan Page then talks about the history that he's had with Darby Allin, especially, I'm guessing or assuming, the matches he had with Darby Allin from Evolve, which were fantastic matches. Allin then attacks Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky. Ethan then throws Allin down the concrete stairs, which looks like it may have injured Darby Allin's arm. So, again, looks like this whole thing between Ethan Page, Scorpio Sky, and Sting and Darby Allin's far from over. So I'm definitely looking forward to what's going to happen next. But all in all, a really good segment. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card as well. It is Julia Hart versus Britt Baker. This was a relatively fast match. Again, it was kind of more Britt Baker versus Jobber, if you will. Baker ends up applying a quick lockjaw on Julia Hart, and your winner of the match is Britt Baker. Obviously, all this match did was hype up Britt Baker going into her match at Double or Nothing against Shida for Shida's AEW Women's Championship. It's all this match was about. It's going to just keep making Britt Baker look good, leading up to the match that he's going to have with Shida for the AEW Women's Championship, I should say. So hats off to Britt Baker for getting the win in this match. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card as well. It is Jurassic Express versus SCU versus the Acclaim versus the Varsity Blondes. pretty much for a #1 contendership match against the Young Bucks for their AEW Tag Team Championships. All in all, this match was a good match. Just to start off with, it was a very good match. I know some people are kind of against the big tag team matches. I'm not really against it. And obviously this was to figure out who was going to be the new #1 contender for the Young Bucks AEW Tag Team Championships. But Daniels and Kazarian end up hitting the BME on Pillman Jr., pin him for the 3, and your winners of the match are SCU. And because they won this match, obviously they move on next week to challenge the Young Bucks for the AEW Tag Team Championships. In my honest opinion, I had SCU winning this match. Obviously stemming from last week, in the kind of the war of worlds, if you will, between SCU and the Young Bucks. Obviously, the storyline is heading towards SCU versus the Young Bucks, and that's exactly why SCU ended up picking the victory in this match. So hats off to them for getting the win in this match. Moving on from that, we have a Tony Schiavone interview with Kenny Omega. Pretty much, supposed to be a big announcement on who Kenny Omega is going to face at Double or Nothing for his AEW World Heavyweight Championship, and that was announced. Tony Schiavone said that next week we're going to have Orange Cassidy versus Pac, and the winner of that match will get an opportunity at Kenny Omega for Omega's AEW World Heavyweight Championship. I'm all for it. I'm all for it, man. I know some people don't want to see Pac versus Omega again. I don't think that's what we're going to get, and I'm hoping we're not. I think between those two guys, the money match is Kenny Omega versus Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy, I believe his record's 8-0. I think Pac is 8-1, if I'm not mistaken. Initially, I thought Adam Page, even though he had lost to Brian Cage last week, I thought he was going to get the opportunity to face Omega for his championship. Obviously, that's not the case. I'm all for Orange Cassidy getting an opportunity if he ends up beating Pac. I'm all for it. Orange Cassidy's been on one hell of a tear since he's been in pro wrestling, at least with AEW, so I am all for Orange Cassidy versus Kenny Omega. But I will say this too, Omega's promo that he did cut within that interview with Schiavone was a little bit long. I feel like it was a stretch and it kind of wasn't needed. But moving on from that, we go into another interview. It's Tony Schiavone interviewing Miro. Miro says that he has signed a contract for a match that he wants championship gold around his waist. So the match that he has signed a contract for is going to be Darby Allin versus Miro next week for Allin's TNT Championship, which I'm all for it, man. I think Miro not working with Kip Sabian it's a hell of a lot better for his career. I don't know what's going to be next for Kip Sabian after this. Maybe AEW Dark or AEW Elevation. Right now, I just don't think he needs to be on TNT right now. I just don't see it. But I'm all for seeing Darby Allin versus Miro for the TNT Championship, man. I think it's going to be one hell of a match next week, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Moving on from that, we go into a main event of the evening. It is the Inner Circle versus Pinnacle in the Blood and Guts cage match. Starting off the match, Dax Harwood and Guevara both come into the match first for their both respective teams. A couple of side notes too is Guevara. Guevara had some crazy spots in this match. Guevara hitting that springboard Spanish fly on Spears off the ropes, absolutely phenomenal. And then when Guevara went to the top rope, hit it coast to coast on Spears, absolutely devastating, man. Tully then gets involved in the match, ends up attacking the ref and gets the key to the cage. He ends up opening the cage door, allowing MJF to escape the cage, and MJF climbs the top of the cage. Jericho then is climbing the cage as well. MJF then hits Jericho with the diamond ring, which causes Jericho to be busted wide open. MJF then goes to throw Jericho off the top of the cage, and Guevara is yelling that they surrender, and your winners of the match are Pinnacle. After the match, though, MJF ends up throwing Jericho off the cage anyways, landed on this, looks like a stage structure down below. And again, it was an awesome match. And until the last 5 minutes, I will say that. Now, I will say this. Number one, the match itself was great. Every person in that match was busted wide open, and they just went at it. And it was a great match. But once they got to the top of the cage and it was just MJF and Jericho, that's when the match started taking a bad turn. Number one, you can tell Jericho was holding something in his hand that looks like he was going to use that to make himself be busted wide open. And after, MJF hit Jericho with the diamond ring, obviously it caused Jericho to be busted wide open. And the other thing, too, was the fall off the cage that Jericho landed on the stage structure down below. A lot of people were disappointed in that, and they were not happy. And they were not happy so much to the point where I believe 5 people in the crowd that night actually asked Tony Khan for their refund, and they got it. That's not a good look, man. It's really not a good look. And a lot of people were disappointed with it. NXT even shot some jabs about it. I think Shotzi Blackheart put out a tweet making fun of Jericho's landing on the stage structure down below. It did not look good. It didn't. And a lot of people were referring that ending of that match to the Kenny Omega Jon Moxley barbed wire death match. which again was a complete flop. That match that Omega and Moxley had in that barbed wire match, that was one of the worst endings of a barbed wire match I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen a lot, especially, the barbed wire death matches being relatively known in a promotion known as FMW, with the likes of Cactus Jack, Terry Funk, Onita, Hayabusa. I mean, some of those matches were just absolutely fantastic matches to watch, man. I don't even think, I believe Onita was in the crowd for that match too, and I don't think he was relatively happy either with the ending on how that match went. But a lot of people are saying that this kind of gave the same feeling. Now, I don't know if Tony Khan put his 2 cents in on what he wanted as a finish, or if this was Jericho's idea. Now, credit, I don't want Jericho to have a career-ending injury, but you could tell that there was something built for that cage match, and somebody was going to fall off and hit that. And the way they set it up, it looked like a steel plate, like a part of a stage, and it was not. Some people were saying there was cardboard underneath that stage structure. I don't know. But I know a lot of people were not happy about it. The other thing, too, is, the news and rumors that are coming out of AEW. Number one, next week's show is going to be absolutely fantastic. You have Jon Moxley defending the IWGP United States Championship in a match on Dynamite on TNT against New Japan talent Yuji Nagata. Now, I'm all for that, man. Obviously, the open door, or the forbidden door, is wide open at this point. And obviously, AEW is in a working relationship with New Japan, stemming from the whole Kenta showing up on the AEW. And now you have Yuji Nagata showing up to challenge Jon Moxley for Moxley's IWGP United States Championship. Man, I'm all for it, number one. Number two, you have the Young Bucks defending their AEW Tag Team Championship against SCU next week, and possibly Darby Allin versus Miro for Allen's TNT Championship, man. So next week is just going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be a great night for AEW, in my honest opinion. But as far as a rating for this show for Blood and Guts last night, like I do with every single one of these shows that I do, I have to give this a rating. I'm going to give it a 7 to 7.5, man. I'm not going to sit here and say this was the best event show that Dynamite has put together. I'm not going to say that. For a bunch of reasons. And the reason why I'm giving it a 7 or 7.5 was the cage match up until the last 5 minutes of that cage match. Now, the beginning of the cage match was awesome. When you had Inner Circle and Pinnacle face-to-face, both teams in those two rings, and they just, attack each other like gladiators, man, it's just absolutely phenomenal stuff. The MJF and Jericho stuff in the last 5 minutes of that match was not needed. It wasn't. Now, did I have Pinnacle going over in that match? I did. I think it was time for Pinnacle to get a win, to kind of showcase to everybody that they are a force to be reckoned with within the AEW roster. So I had them going over in this match. But a lot of people were not happy about the finish. They just weren't, man. A lot of people were not happy. And the fact that people were actually literally asking for refunds because they were not happy with that event is not a good look. It's really not. And a lot of people were saying, too, that it was miscommunication of what was actually going to go on last night in the last night's event. The people that actually went to the event last night only literally, for what I understand, got one match, and that was Blood and Guts. Everything prior to leading up to Blood and Guts was pre-taped, was not shown that night. So the people that were at Daly's Place just only got the Blood and Guts match. So they were not happy at all. And some people were, I'm sure more people were asking for a refund, but I believe there was only 5 people in that audience that asked for a refund. And then some, obviously some of the staff in AEW were not happy about it. They were, thinking that people were just being stingy about it. Look, man, I mean, I love AEW. I love what they do. They have a very good roster, all in all. And honestly, compared to NXT, I think AEW is a little bit better than NXT, in my honest opinion. I really do. They're keeping it fresh, they're keeping it new, and they're continuing storylines to lead up to a perfect match, in my honest opinion. But, that cage match last night at the ending didn't help them at all. But like I said, I'm going to have to give this a 7 or 7.5, man. But this is my AEW Blood and Guts review. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.